This week's edition of NJBIA's Minding Your Business is brought to you in part by AT&T, helping family, friends, and neighbors connect in meaningful ways every day. From the first phone call 140 years ago to mobile video streaming today, AT&T innovates to improve lives. And by New Jersey Business Magazine, providing the critical information needs for New Jersey's business community for more than 65 years.
Welcome to NJBIA's Minding Your Business. I'm your host, Bob Considine. Well, the great Garden State has $6.4 billion in federal recovery aid coming to it as part of the American Rescue Plan. So how should New Jersey use it? Well, those thoughts were provided by some of the state's foremost business, education, nonprofit, and labor leaders at a recent New Jersey Business Coalition press conference hosted by NJBIA President and CEO Michelle Sakirka. And today we're going to hear from them, starting with Christina Renna, President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce of Southern New Jersey. Let's take a look.
I want to now take a step and dive into some of the comments that Michelle sort of made at the top and look a little bit deeper into those, because at the end of the day, $6.4 billion is a tremendous influx of money. And with this tremendous amount of money comes tremendous opportunity for the state of New Jersey. But I think all of us tuning in today would agree, unfortunately, that historically New Jersey has not always been the most fiscally prudent in its approach to budgeting and spending. That could be a little bit of an understatement, unfortunately, which is why we're here today. And we are not here to look backwards, but we are all here to look forward. We want this money to be spent responsibly and in a way that really helps those most in need and those that have been most vulnerable and most impacted by the course of the pandemic. So to piggyback off of Michelle's opening comments, and again, John Harmon, I do want to start with the need for non-reoccurring items in whatever comes out of this, the 6.4 million. We saw NJBIA and state governments stand up some one-time grant programs that were fantastic, but unfortunately the need was so great, they were oversubscribed immediately. And we need more of those kinds of programs for the immediate hit, for our small businesses, for our nonprofits, for our most in need that need money today, no strings attached cash. Some of the 6.4 billion needs to go to those kinds of programs that are not going to pop up down the road in future budgets and then we need to increase taxes. We have this money now. Let's create the programs for the businesses and nonprofits and other organizations most in need while we have it at our disposal. But that's not the only answer to this question, unfortunately. Not one thing. It has to be a combination of a lot of things to make the $6.4 billion go as far as possible. The second piece of this is long-term planning. So we need immediate help, and then we need long-term planning as well. We need, at the end of the day, a multi-year approach that brings us to that fiscal year 2024 timeline that we have been giving to space out, to help those in need. So those in need know that there's not just one shot time now, but also some foundation there that for the next few years, as our businesses and our most vulnerable residents continue to get out of recovery mode, it's not just going to disappear overnight. That is absolutely crucial to spreading out this money, but it's going to take fiscal discipline from our state government leaders, and something that combination of grant money and then a long-term approach is really the two prongs that are going to make spreading out the $6.4 billion so successful. Last but not least, I just want to, address the need for capital here in the state. And that ties in with the long-term strategy. The state receives this kind of influx of money, and then we need to use this money to invest. How can these funds be spent in a way that we maximize our return as a state on investment to grow long-term revenues in New Jersey? Everyone hears all of us say this, that small businesses are the lifeblood of our economy or the backbone of our economy. We need to be sure that we are continuing to provide enough assistance that is not just the grant money to get them back on their feet, but also what happens with that is it grows our economy and therefore grows our state revenues and helps our budget long-term. So these are just some of the important things we implore the administration, our legislative leaders to take a look at. The state is very fortunate to have this level of assistance coming to us, but it's all going to be for naught if not spent responsibly, with an eye towards the need for immediate relief as well as long-term leveraging of the dollars.
All right, so debt relief is also a consideration of New Jersey's usage of the American Rescue Plan funding. For more on that, we go to Ralph Albert Thomas, CEO of the New Jersey Society of CPAs.
Good morning, everybody. And as Christina said, I'm the CEO and Executive Director of the New Jersey Society of CPAs, which represents 14,000 CPAs in New Jersey. Martin Luther King said, every crisis has both its dangers and its opportunities. Each can spell either salvation or doom. After 12 months of economic anxiety caused by the devastating impacts of COVID-19, the more than $6 billion that New Jersey will receive under the American Rescue Plan presents an opportunity for salvation, or at least responsible decision-making. With a $6 billion budget surplus projected for fiscal 2021, and more than $6 billion from the American Rescue Plan on its way, it's crucial that the state make smart decisions and be strategic about how the dollars are deployed. And anyone to do that is addressing our long-term structural debt. It's no secret that New Jersey is one of the most indebted states in the country. At the close of 2019, we had $44 billion in debt, according to the state's debt report. Adding the $4 billion which we borrowed in 2020, we're looking at $48 billion in debt. Our annual debt service before we borrowed the $4 billion was in the neighborhood of $4 billion. And now on top of that, you can add another $450 million annually, which is the debt service we'll be paying for the $4 billion we borrowed last year. There's no question that that's a lot of borrowing, and all New Jerseyans wind up paying for it. So we offer the following recommendations. First, the state should conduct an immediate audit to identify all debt that can be paid down, and that it can be paid as soon as possible. Secondly, if able, New Jersey should reserve at least 1/3 of the federal funds for a special short-term surplus to draw down over multiple budgets for anticipated spending growth, such as for the emergency bonding, debt service, and to pay down debt. And legislation should be passed to guarantee that these funds are not rated for other purposes, which, as we all know, happens too often. Third, the state should bolster the unemployment system by dedicating at least $400 million to pay down the unemployment insurance trust fund debt, which will delay the pending unemployment insurance payroll tax increase on jobs by a year. At last, but not certainly least, spending should be focused on non-recurring items that fill a need but will not need to be used or have ongoing expenditures in future state budgets. This all seems simple, right? To avoid creating long-term structural deficits, future budgets, New Jersey should pay for expenditures with recurring revenues earned the same year. We believe these recommendations are bipartisan and really common sense solutions that face us and are the basis for a long-term plan that will put our state on solid economic footing. New NJCPA members serve tens of thousands of businesses and individuals. They are on the front line of the state's economy, in the trenches with the people who make the thousands of decisions every day, big and small, that shape New Jersey's economic climate. Our members are, and by large, practical and realistic. They know that the state can't tax and spend its way off this physical cliff, and that real planning is needed. There's much at stake, and our association stands ready to be a resource to lawmakers.
Another priority for federal recovery funding is equity for minority-owned businesses and underserved communities. For more on that, we go to John Harmon, President and CEO of the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey.
You know, this Sunday was Easter across America and across the world for those who recognize that day, but also it was the anniversary of the death of Martin Luther King Jr., who the preceding day, April 4th, 1968, he was in Memphis advocating on behalf of the inequities facing Blacks and poor people, not only in Memphis, but across America. But to Michelle's point, we see this as an excellent opportunity for our state to effectively leverage our federal tax dollars to implement a comprehensive plan to address health and education disparities, our workforce competitiveness, and business stimulation from the standpoint of opportunities and pathways to grow and sustain our businesses across our great state. I just have a few recommended actions that we could take to make New Jersey a little more equitable. And, I want to underscore, we need a comprehensive plan over the long term so we can see our way to a more fair and just state. But we should prioritize New Jersey-based businesses as it relates to state contract opportunities. The businesses that are based here in the state should have some priority with state contract opportunities. Consider eliminating or reducing prevailing wage requirements on small business improvement grants. We know there's going to be some grants and resources made available to small businesses, but I would say, from my experience, grants at, under $50,000 to put a huge prevailing wage obligation on those businesses. Many of them don't have the wherewithal to do certified payroll, so impacting small businesses is minimized. So I think that's something we should take a look at. I believe that poorest communities granted priority on all resource disbursements. Those communities that have systemic problems, historic problems in terms of poverty, unemployment, and not a part of the mainstream should be given a priority in the areas that I mentioned: health, education, workforce, and business. Also, establish grant opportunities for cultural tourism to drive business to hospitality and destination venues in our state. Underperforming urban retail and entertainment and wholesale businesses, we should really look at how we can leverage these resources to bring hope and optimism back to those sectors of our economy. And then lastly, resources for small businesses. Technology, getting our businesses positioned to compete in the 21st century opportunity is so important. Some facade improvements and operational upgrades. For example, point of sale systems and e-commerce. We're in a more innovative, disruptive environment, and these businesses could really use the help by leveraging these resources to put them in a better place.
You're watching NJBIA's Minding Your Business. We'll be back right after this.
These days, it's anything but business as usual. That's why working together is more important than ever. AT&T is committed to keeping you connected so you can keep your patients cared for, your customers served, your students inspired, and your employees closer than ever. Our network is resilient. Our people are strong. Our job is to keep your business connected. It's what we've always done. It's what we'll always do.
You're first. First to respond. First to put others' lives before your own. And in an emergency, you need a network that puts you first, that connects you to technology and each other, that's built with and for first responders. FirstNet, the only officially authorized wireless network for first responders. Because putting you first is our job.
Welcome back to NJBIA's Minding Your Business. I'm Bob Considine. Well, we continue with messages from New Jersey's business community on how the Garden State can best use $6.4 billion in pandemic recovery funding. We now turn to Libby Vinson, Senior Vice President of Association Business Solutions, on how funding should best be applied for nonprofits. Take a look.
At ABS, I have the privilege of working with many nonprofits serving diverse needs and interests across New Jersey, and particularly our most vulnerable populations. And obviously, no question the pandemic, as John said at the beginning of the call, has amplified the inequities that already existed in this state. It showed weaknesses in our systems, particularly serving those most vulnerable. In response, nonprofits, as they always do, have stepped up to serve. They've pivoted and changed, some changed to a virtual format while their facilities were closed, while others changed their focus or revamped services to address the needs that were exacerbated by the crisis. Food insecurity, mental health, the new childcare issues, new challenges faced by parents that now have to navigate the balance of work and remote learning. They really spent time, working on those areas. But it's so important to note that not all nonprofits had the opportunity or ability to pivot in this way. Many will never open their doors again, and those that have many of them been operating at a loss since the start of the pandemic. That's why it's so critically important that the state deploy these federal funds targeted directly at issues that have grown since the start of the pandemic, and also longer term investments to enable nonprofits that don't have the resources to make facility and technological upgrades so they can serve more efficiently, effectively, and essentially challenge the perennial and unequal impact of crises on our state's most vulnerable, as we're seeing right now during the pandemic. Food insecurity, we have seen the numbers are staggering. In fact, more than 1.2 million New Jerseyans are now projected to be food insecure, with over 430,000 being newly food insecure, according to the Community Food Bank. Funding to the food banks to meet this increased need is certainly needed, but also strengthening the emergency food network, which are the local providers at the community level, the food bank, the food pantries, soup kitchens, those the places that people turn to get their food in their time of need. Long-term improvements to food storage infrastructure, supply chain processes, mobile units, areas that would enable them to be more resilient for future crises. We also see, of course, stress, anxiety, social isolation, loss of family, jobs. The need for mental health services now and coming out of the pandemic will continue to be at epic levels. And we've all seen how the pandemic has dramatically changed the learning environment for our children. After months of remote learning and social isolations, parents need a safe place for their children. And I'm not just talking about schools. I'm talking about out of school time, robust before and after school programs, camps, summer enrichment programs. These programs need to be more accessible and affordable to all, with continued investment in the child care subsidies. And what's so critically important is that government should not be competing with nonprofits to deliver these services, but instead capitalize on the expertise of nonprofits that have been in this space for so long and partner with them to reach as many vulnerable populations as possible. There's no need for redundancies or program duplication. Nonprofits have the ability to, with investment, to hit the ground running as they've been doing from the start of the pandemic. The YMCAs, for example, an organization that we've proudly worked with, have been at the forefront of out-of-school learning time, enrichment programs, academic support. School districts should be looking to them as a partner to leverage resources and use these monies in the most impactful way. I would say the role of nonprofits has likely never been so important than it is right now. And besides the sector helping them, nonprofits meet the immediate needs brought on by the pandemic, this long-term funding will enable New Jersey's nonprofits to modernize and upgrade facilities, make infrastructure and system improvements so they're more resilient, and will enable them to respond to needs now and also in the future. One other point that I want to make about some funding and grant programs, nonprofits are often put in the same bucket as small employers. So many programs so far that have come out of the EDA are larger nonprofits that have experienced financial distress have been ineligible. So it's certainly something the state should look at, is even though a nonprofit may exceed an employee threshold, the need is certainly there, and they're different than the small businesses.
Next up is Dr. Joel Bloom, the president of the New Jersey Institute of Technology, who says New Jersey can get some real bang for its buck by applying federal recovery dollars to STEM education. Let's take a look.
Allow me to begin by recognizing Governor Murphy's blueprint for a fairer and stronger New Jersey economy. In it, he recognizes that STEM education and training requires a significant focus in order to move the New Jersey economy forward. It is widely acknowledged that STEM, particularly engineering, is at the center of innovation. In addition, engineering is reported, and it's been found, to be a workforce multiplier. For every engineering position, there are often 7 downstream jobs. The beauty of STEM is that it's about a continuum of workers, from the tradesman or tradeswoman as a technologist who may want to well become an electrician, to the engineer, the mathematician, and the research scientist. So it's a whole continuum for the STEM professions and industries. Also, we know there are multiple modalities to prepare the high demand workforce, from apprenticeships for electricians and IT technologists, short courses and certificates to move a manufacturing technologist into advanced materials and advanced manufacturing, or the university graduate who will be responsible for designing the next AI platform for drug distribution, or researching nanomaterials that are environmentally green, or those nanomaterials in your windshield wiper that turn on your wipers when the rain hits it. We need a plan, as my colleagues have said, for education and training programs to serve these multiple STEM professions, whose projected growth is to double, much more so than most other professions, particularly for our state, which has often been recited as having more scientists and engineers per square mile than any other state in the nation. The STEM salary is often 50% greater than most other professions because the demand so outstrips the supply. And there are major workforce growth opportunities for the underrepresented women and minorities, for whom there is much opportunity in these high-paying jobs. I must share with you that at NJIT's Newark College of Engineering, NCE, which has been generally acknowledged as educating 1/3 of the engineers in the state, we also educate over 60% of the state's minority engineers. And we are acknowledged nationally as being in the top 20 universities for educating Black and Hispanic engineers, as well as computer scientists. 3 years ago, NJIT, in anticipation of the growing demand for technologists, established the School of Applied Engineering and Technology, currently enrolls well over 1,000 students, as well as we've now opened the largest makerspace in the Northeast. It is a hands-on space for learning and innovation in design, engineering, and material science. It is not only open to our students, it is open to business and industry. Some have stated that STEM is the new liberal arts, and it may well be. However, we must recognize, if this is the case, if in fact every business and industry in our state and well beyond is increasingly a technological one, it's becoming digital, it's using AI, it's reviewing large data sets, but there is a price to a STEM workforce. And the price for a STEM workforce has been well researched and documented as being 60 to 100% greater to prepare an engineer, for example, say as compared to an English major, 60 to 100% more expensive. So the state and the incoming CARES Act money and its funding needs to recognize, to have this workforce, which the governor has identified as necessary to move the state forward. There does need to be some cases, a one-time allocation of funding for some immediate short-term training, but this longer-term plan to have an ongoing, well-developed workforce for STEM. So a plan for New Jersey STEM workforce is needed, and there needs to be the recognition that there is a delta cost to produce this workforce. The governor has already started along that avenue along with his STEM loan forgiveness program. But there is much, much more to do to create New Jersey's high-demand STEM workforce.
And last but not least, we turn to Bernie Corrigan, the president of IBEW Local 102, who discusses how federal relief dollars for infrastructure will help bring more jobs to New Jersey's economy.
First, I just want to say that I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I want to open up by saying how much Local 102 appreciates our partners in higher ed and in the business community. It's only with open dialogue that we move New Jersey forward. So big thanks to Michelle Sakirker and her team at NJBIA for always bringing us together. As a building trades guy, I'm happy to talk about infrastructure. But before we talk about the most important item, job gains, I think we can all agree on several things. New Jersey infrastructure desperately needs an upgrade. Comprehensive long-term planning is a common theme I've been hearing. By investing in school construction, safety upgrades, we provide an environment our children can safely return to. An investment in energy, transportation, clean water, telecommunications. I fully realize there needs to be a balance, but improvements in these sectors provide immediate construction jobs while providing a solid foundation for New Jersey's future. When we look at technology in our state, some of the operating systems in our state departments have long gone beyond their lifespan, creating delays at many levels. A common concern I hear from our contractors are the hurdles placed in front of them by the permitting process. The pandemic also saw the unemployment system overwhelmed. Simply stated, we need to take the barriers down that inhibit progress in our state. Now, as for some numbers, OMB states that for every $1 million spent, 22 direct construction and ancillary jobs are created. I've heard similar numbers locally with one of our utilities saying they expect to create 15 long-term jobs along with 5 construction jobs per million. Now, I do want to take a couple of minutes to applaud the apprenticeship model utilized in our state. It shows its greatest strength within the building trades family, and my thanks to Governor Murphy for his strong advocacy of these programs. Now, more specifically at 102, I want to discuss our continuing education program. I feel it segues well into the workforce development piece. While at our core, we train electricians, we acknowledge that construction is cyclical and embrace the opportunity to upskill our membership, giving them the tools to pivot with agility as our technology changes and the general landscape of jobs changes. We provide everything from CDLs to college degrees to professional certificates. I close with this because basically this is where we move forward. This is where labor, higher education, and the business community meets to provide the skills needed to move our great state forward.
All right, a lot of great ideas there from our business leaders, and we look forward to reporting how that federal pandemic recovery funding is going to be used. In closing, we bring you to another one of NJBIA's New Good Neighbor Award winners. This time around, we take you to the Atlantic Rehabilitation Institute in Madison, New Jersey. Have a look.
Atlantic Rehabilitation Institute is a $24 million, 2-story, 38-bed, all-private room, acute inpatient rehab hospital. So the goal and intent of the joint venture was to take the value of the Atlantic Health System being a premier provider of healthcare in the state of New Jersey and throughout the region, and couple that with the expertise that Kindred Healthcare brings in the post-acute space, being a leader in patient outcomes and great quality care. The site was important because, we really wanted to provide a space that had all the latest technology, that had, enough space to provide, private rooms for our patients. And again, to really focus on quality care, to really focus on the dignity and respect for each patient, and a space that they could feel comfortable and that was inviting. And that's what we're able to do with this new joint venture. And so, seeing patients go home, it really instills, it really brings out a sense of pride for us, because that's what we're here for. That's what we wake up every morning and come to this building to do, is to provide that care, to provide that hope, to let people know that, improvement is possible. And so when we see people walk out that may have come in on a stretcher, there's nothing better. That's the most important thing that we do.
All right, a lot of great work there by the Atlantic Health System and Kindred Healthcare. And we thank you for joining us on NJBIA's Minding Your Business. We'll see you next time.